Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us today. We're really excited to have you enjoy our conversation between Dr. Sahar Talebloo and Ms. Lauren Camacho. My name is Donovan Osio. I am the general manager of the tdaperks program, and we review and endorse vendors both for your professional life as well as your personal life. And tonight's webinar is brought to you by Bank of America Practice Solutions. Our speakers tonight are Dr. Sahar Talebloo. She grew up in New Orleans and she earned her doctorate of dental surgery at Louisiana State University School of Dentistry. Upon graduating, she decided to move to Austin and began working at a practice that specializes in cosmetic dentistry. A natural leader at heart, Dr. Talebloo decided to strike out on her own after a few years and establish her practice, Smile Suite, in 2024. Outside of dentistry, Dr. Talebloo is a strong believer in staying active and maintaining a good work-life balance. And our speaker from Bank of America tonight is Lauren Camacho. She's a vice president of sales for Practice Solutions, and she oversees, but is not limited to, Central and South Texas. Lauren has been in the banking profession for over 10 years and has been lucky enough to help with over 1,000 offices and acquisitions. Practice Solutions is a boutique division within Bank of America that specializes in providing lending solutions for the dental industry, including business owners, associates, and new dentists. She balances her professional success with time spent traveling with her kids and husband. Tonight, we'll have a little section for a question and answer at the end of the session. If something comes up during, though, please feel free to include it in the chat, and we'll be sure to hold it over for that point. And without further ado, Ms. Lauren Camacho and Dr. Sahar Talebloo. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thanks, Donovan. I appreciate it. Hi, Dr. Talebloo. How are you?
Good. How are you? Thanks, Donovan.
Good. Thank you. So let's get started. It's been a fun time doing this project with you, and I know people probably have a lot of questions. So first thing, just to kick us off, can you tell us a little bit about what made you decide to start your own practice?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, the process has definitely been filled with challenges, but it's been fun. The short answer is independence. And the long answer would be I just wanted freedom to practice the type of dentistry that was fulfilling to me. I wanted the autonomy to make my own decisions that were more in line with my core values, right? I always had this vision of a practice that provided an experience to patients that's kind of different from your traditional dental office, which everyone is very afraid of, right? And I believe in strong relationships, and I wanted to build a community of patients that valued their dental health and education.
Perfect. Yeah. And when we talk about startups, right, that's really the nice part is you get to build your own culture. You get to build your own practice. It's your vision, right? You get to really bring that to life. I know a lot of people can be fearful about going the startup route just due to the fact that on day one, there's no guaranteed patient base, right? When you walk in the door. Was there anything specific that you did to prepare for doing a startup, or maybe that made you decide that you wanted to go the startup route versus buying an office?
Sure. So you're right. I mean, there's risks in everything, right? There's benefits in buying a practice that's already there because you start day one with patients, right? But for me, the downside of that was I was walking into an office that already had set systems and set core values and a culture that may not have been aligned with mine. So I decided to a startup because I wanted to build it from the ground up. And with that, the risk of it is that you start first day with no patients, right? But at least I knew the patients were going to come in from me, right? And I wasn't going to take over a practice where, oh, maybe they didn't want a female dentist, or maybe I don't do it like the old dentist treatment plan or things like that, right? But when I started on my own, I knew that it was going to be my way, my core values, my culture, and my systems in place.
Awesome. Okay. So another question. You said, opening day one, like we just talked about. Can you tell me a little bit, have you done anything to prepare for, because we're real close, right, to grand opening, right around the corner, thank God. But can you tell me, did you do anything marketing wise? Like walk me through that. I know sometimes, we hear recommendations of like start marketing 3 months out or 2 months out. Have you done anything yet to make sure that your books are full or you've got some patients in place when you do open the practice on day one?
Yeah, absolutely. So I did a lot of research on marketing, right? Because you spend all this money building a practice and you don't want to open the doors and say, okay, now what, right? So I'm working with a marketing company and I did a lot of ground marketing. They usually say 3 months is a good time to get started. Mine was kind of between that 2.5 months just because construction is so unpredictable, right? But I did ground marketing. We are doing a website with SEO, making sure that, and really word of mouth. Word of mouth has been very important. It's like anywhere I go, I'm like, oh, I'm putting my practice, here's the business card, right? You just want people to know, because you never know when an accident's going to happen and when someone's going to need a dentist. And I want my business card to be in their back pocket when that day comes.
You're the first one that they're going to call when they crack that
Exactly.
tooth, right? Okay.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, another question too, big one, right? When we talk about going back and thinking back to how we started, talk to me about this. If you were to do this all over again from day one, knowing what you know now, what are 3 things that you would recommend to someone looking to do a startup?
That's a very good question, right? I mean, they say hindsight's 2020, right? So once you've done it and looking backward, I would definitely say start with the end in mind, because that is going to help you so much throughout the entire process. So what does that mean? It means specifically know what your vision is in this whole process, right? How many ops do you want to have? What kind of dentistry do you want to do? What is your ideal patient? What's the market you're trying to target, right? All these questions will play a big role as you're building the perfect practice for you. And kind of the beauty of it is that there is no right or wrong answer, right? It's yours. You get to do it however you want to do it. Secondly, I would say definitely do a demographic analysis, right? And that's going to tell you what areas are growing. What is the dentist to population ratio? Is it too saturated? Because you never want to be in you might like a certain location, but if there's 10, general dentists within the 2-mile radius, that's probably not a good idea, right? Do some Google searches. It's so easy. We're always on the phone anyway. Just, Google general dentist and see what's going on in that 5-mile, 2-mile radius. So I was lucky enough to be introduced to Practice Real Estate Group through you guys, through Bank of America. Shout out Mark Story. And he did all the heavy lifting for me, truly from day one. I told him, what my ideal patient is and where I would ideally like to be. And he came back with pages and pages of data and analytics and kind of helped me narrow down my location to where it would set me up for success down the road, right? And not only did he give me the data, but he helped explain it to me. He let me know why these numbers made sense for the practice that I wanted to have, right? And I know there are other dental demographic analysis companies out there, but I decided to go with the dental specific realtor who, have many years of experience, and they did all that for me at no cost to me, which was very nice.
Perfect.
And lastly, I would say going with a healthcare specific lender, which obviously for me was Bank of America. One thing that, before I started, I knew for sure is I had a vision and I knew what I wanted, but I just wasn't really sure how I was going to get there, right? And the team at Bank of America really helped connect me to supportive network of industry experts who really kind of brought my vision to life, right? And bridge that gap for me. They held my hand through the entire process. I mean, you were there from day one. And there was a lot of areas where I lacked knowledge in, and it was very reassuring to know that you guys were experts and you were gonna kind of, help me make smart choices that were beneficial to me down the road.
So you're calling me an expert? You've said it. You've admitted it finally. So one thing, and I've never actually got to ask you this question, but I'm glad we've been able to, hold your hand and help you. And Mark's story is great. Another thing too, just to circle back, I know you got to use Mark, right, which was great. But if you decided that, hey, you were going to go the purchase route, did you ever explore Dentographics or any of those other demographic report, where you can pull the demographic reports, or did you only go through Mark? Because I know you kind of started the process and then, we got you connected and everything, but was there anything else you explored prior to that?
So I didn't actually, I explored them to where I knew they were out there, but I didn't actually sign up with any of them to move forward, because for me, Mark being the expert that he is and knowing the area and knowing all the do's and don'ts in startups, and especially doing it at no cost to me.
Yeah.
That was very valuable.
We're pitching pennies in these startups, aren't we? Okay, perfect. So one other thing, I was leading there and then I squirreled there for a second. But I've never asked you, what made you choose B of A over any other lender when you say you chose me for the healthcare specific side?
Yeah, that's a great question. And how have we never talked about this,
I
right?
don't know. We've only spent 14 hours a day in a car together. So great question.
So let's take a step back a little bit. As I was educating myself to what kind of loans were available to dental startups and dentists, I came across two options. The SBA loan was one, and the conventional bank loan was the other. Obviously, since you're the expert, tell us a little bit about the difference between the two, and I'll let you know why I picked who I picked.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. All right. So difference between SB and conventional. First of all, I always tell my doctors, if you have the option to go conventional, then go conventional because it's going to save you on fees. It's going to get you into a fixed rate. And, we have aggressive rates and we've got flexible terms, things of that nature. However, it's also dependent on your situation, right? And your goals. So if you're to tell me, hey, if you would have said, I'm going to go buy a piece of land, right? And I want to put a building on it and take it from land to vertical and we're going to go ground up, then of course SBA is a great option for that, right? They've got flexible terms. They do that day in and day out, and that's a really good option. But what I'll tell you is because every situation is so different, if that's a question that you have in your mind, then set up time and discuss it with your healthcare lending rep because we can guide you through what's going to be the best situation for you. I would tell you that most banks, right, most healthcare specific lenders, we love lending to dentists and conventional financing is what most banks are going to offer you. So if you've got that option to go conventional, I'd go that route at fixed rates. They've got good terms, less fees, things of that nature.
Yeah, very good. So when you and I sat down, for me, conventional loan made the most sense, right? Based on what I was looking for and kind of the directions I wanted to go. But just because I went the Bank of America route doesn't mean everybody has to, right? And I think, but you should have a list of questions that you're going to ask these banks when you interview them, right? Because truly it is an interview to see what is the best fit for you, right? So for me, first, it was, am I the first dentist that they're going to ever work with, right? So, is this bank, had they done startups before, right? Or am I going to be their guinea pig? One thing that I was, rest assured with Bank of America was I was one of 1,000 doctors that they have worked with, right? And that was great because they knew more about this than I did, and that's what I wanted. I wanted an expert, right? So second for me was their payment structure, right? So whether that payment structure during construction, what did that look like? And also the repayment plan once my loan closed. And how readily my funds would be available to my contractor and to my vendors. Was it going to be super quick? Once my contractor, once they got the job done, they needed money. What did that look like? And obviously, a good interest rate matters, right? But unfortunately, sometimes that's the only thing doctors look at. And I would really encourage you to dig a little deeper beyond the interest rate. Lauren, do you want to elaborate on how Bank of America differs in some of those aspects from other banks?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of things we'll talk through and we'll talk through them briefly. But as it was mentioned at the beginning by Donovan, so Bank of America has been around for 25 years, right? So that's kind of leaning into you're not our first doctor. And Practice Solutions is a boutique division within the bank. So we specialize in healthcare financing. All we do day in and day out is work with dentists, medical doctors, and veterinarians. So yes, we could say this isn't our first rodeo, y'all. But when we talk about, the three things that you've kind of pointed to, specifically the construction piece, right? Which was a big difference in some of the other lenders that we looked at, is that during construction, you didn't have to make the payments, right? We've got lenders out there that even when you're in construction, and if this is a startup for you, you've got to make those interest only payments and you don't even have patients coming in your door, right? And now you're pulling out of associate income to make those payments and all you're doing is building an office. So that's one big differentiator when we talk about what does that construction process look like and what's required of you. Another thing is when we talk about repayment, you mentioned that was one of the reasons that you went with us, was because you'll see that a lot of lenders have interest strict structures, and that's not one thing that we have. We've got structures that increase and ramp up with you over the first 3 years, right? Because there's no guarantee that by year 2, right, you're going to be whipping out 700, 800,000 in revenues, right? So we want to make sure that you are in a position to where your payments are growing with you as you're growing that practice. We want to set you up for success. I know you saw that when we looked at the different structures that were available, and you and I obviously chose the one that made the most sense for your situation. So that was that's another thing. And then you really talked about are my vendors going to get paid? And you and I both know, right? When we hit delays, that's money not going into your pocket, right? If we're not able to get in there and we're not able to produce, we're talking 25 grand, 30 grand a month that you're not making an income. So every day and every minute counts when it comes to making those payments in time. So shout out to Jenna, your project consultant, that you had assigned, right? We have that team of specialized project consultants that handle all of your payments. So anytime an invoice comes in, we upload those for your approval and we send that money out within 24 to 48 hours. But also, Sahar, I think you can agree. I think one of the nice things, and people get concerned about when you talk about projects, is okay, every bank's going to give you a budget, right? They're going to say, okay, let's just say 700,000. They give you $700,000 and they're like, okay, now how do we spread this money, right? And we plug and play. But the nice part is all of those budgets are fluid. And I think that's really what matters too, is on our loan, we can reallocate as many times as you need. So if we find that there's change orders, or maybe you added a last minute supply order, or things of that nature, we're able to just, move some money around from budget to budget as we see fit during construction, which I think you can agree. I think we needed that a couple of times, right? So
Absolutely.
that
Yeah.
mattered.
And nice to where we didn't have to do anything extra. I would just
Right.
literally send an email to Jenna and she would have it done right away. So that
Jenna's like, done deal. You need 25 grand moved over? I got you.
it was. It really was.
Yeah. And then the last thing, you kind of alluded to it, like interest rate is one thing, but at the end of the day, when you're in repayment, you're not thinking about, and you're opening your practice, are you thinking about, oh, what's my interest rate on my loan, right? No, we're thinking about all the other things we have to do to run this business, right? So the things like your checking account, or how much does it cost me every time somebody's swiping a credit card through that terminal in my office, or, checking account fees or payroll, all of the different things. So I think, one thing we do really well is we take that holistic approach when we're looking at your offers and comparing them to say, okay, here's what your loan's giving you, but here's your other services that you're going to need to run your business. And is it saving you money? Is it costing you money? Are you breaking even? So I think, when we talk about that, we just got to really look through those numbers and those programs and services that they're offering you to make sure that it all makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. I definitely think that definitely dig a little bit deeper. Don't just look at the interest rate and say, okay, this is the bank that I'm going to go with, because there's a lot beyond the surface, right? So I got two questions for you.
Okay.
One, talked about the holistic approach the Bank of America has. Kind of talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So kind of just what I dived into, right? So just outside of the loan, what else are you going to need? One thing that B of A has that I think just really sets the bank apart from other competitors in the market is the preferred rewards program. So you and I have talked about this, right? So the merchant services, making sure that we can get the best rate available for you there, the same day funding, having the terminal in the office, all that good stuff. But then let's talk about the checking account and the preferred rewards program, right? So that's a completely free program that you're in, and you get additional. You get, fee waivers on checking and savings accounts. You get the additional cash back on the credit card. Depending on your tier, you get interest rate discounts, right, on your practice solutions loans. So when we're talking holistic, we're talking about your loan, we're talking about your banking services, and then obviously outside of your loan, once we're all said and done and your project is completed, our goal is that you're not calling the 1-800 number for Bank of America. That's why you have me or your local rep in wherever, whatever city you're in, because there's 85 of me across the country, right? We want to make sure that you've got your local rep. We don't want you calling an 800 number. So it's really that white glove, high touch, service that we're trying to give you. We've got the big bank name right behind us, but then we've got the small bank feel. So when I talk about holistic, I'm talking about everything, not just the loan. And that's what you do in dentistry, right? Your crown could be $1,000 and the guy down the street is going to be 500. But at the end of the day, is it the quality and is that relationship there? Do I trust my dentist, right? Do I trust my banker? So that's really what our goal is here, is to build that relationship and service you on that sort of level, not just say, here's the interest rate, here's the loan, go with me because my interest rate's the best. It's that relationship piece too.
Yeah, and I can definitely attest to that. It's definitely been fantastic, because everything I've needed, I give you a call no matter
this
what.
This is Coaching 360. Sahar, give me my feedback. Live on air, y'all. Don't say anything bad.
Okay. So let's say there's other associate dentists out there listening
Yeah.
to this right now, and they're like, okay, this is what I want. Like, how do I get started? Right. So kind of talk to us about how can an associate dentist kind of plan or qualify for a conventional loan?
Yeah.
Discuss that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So great question. I talk about this a lot, whether it's, with the dental school in San Antonio or doing some, mixers with associate dentists. But there's typically 4 to 5 things that we're going to look at. Most of the healthcare lenders in the space, we're all going to be cash flow lenders. So what that means to you is, a lot of people are like, well, can you give me, a pre-approval? Well, it's not really that simple because we don't lend on debt to income ratio. We're not like mortgage lending. It's actually a lot different than mortgage lending. So, here's some basic things. These are what I'm going to give you is basic things that you kind of want to make sure are in line. But just know that when the time comes, depending on what route you go, right, whether you go startup or whether you go to buy, it could vary. So, the things that I tell you is, we want to make sure that you've been licensed for a year. Now, if you're a specialist, there's a little bit of flexibility in that window, but just make sure that you've been licensed for at minimum a year. With that, we want to make sure that there's earnings history behind you, right? So what I mean by that is that you've been actually associating and practicing dentistry. So typically an average associate is making 180K plus if you're working full time. So, that's typically around what a bank would want or need to see. And then, the third thing, the credit, the big C, right? So we want to make sure that your credit's good. There's no red flags or things that we need to be aware of. And if there are, just make sure that you're letting that local rep that you're working with know so we can figure out how to work through those items with you, and make sure that we address it up front as we're working through the lending process. And then of course, your cash on hand. That's always a big thing, right? Banks want to see that you're a saver. You're not a spender, right? You're not on the doctor's salary and you're not out there buying the $2 million house and the Ferrari, straight out of school. So what I mean by that is just try to keep things lean and mean as you're going through the process, or if you know that your goal is to buy or start a practice. And then my last piece of advice, and this is not at all like, hey, you have to have this, but production reports. If you have the ability to get those from your associate positions, keep those, because if you do decide to go the purchase route, those are super important to be able to show what your production capability is. Now, on the startup side of things, Sahar, you can attest to it. We didn't need your production reports, but of course, it's really helpful to be able to be like, hey, she's $1 million producer. Oh, hey, he's $1 million. Wherever you're at, we want to be able to show what you're capable of producing to help really tell that story to our underwriters, as we're, moving through that process.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are great advice. Advice that I wish I had, right? All I knew was just save money and just hope for the best, right?
You're like, hey, I found you on a podcast. How do I do this? They didn't give a lot of detail. They just said, find a lender.
Exactly how it went.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, okay. So my turn. I got another question because we're so fresh out of it. I think I might have seen something from like Austin Sign Depot or something today. It's talk to me about the construction process and kind of what that was like for you. I know that's a big question from people. Like, how did that go? Did you have hiccups? What did you find that was like, what did you learn through the process, Sahar?
I learned to be patient.
You already are.
No, but in all seriousness, I think with construction, you really have to learn to dance in the rain, right? And the sooner I learned that, the less stressful my life became. There are several ways to start planning your space, right? So in all seriousness, just like I said from the beginning, make sure you have a vision because that vision is so, so important. Most dental equipment companies will drop a plan for you based on your vision and the flow of your office, and they don't charge you anything for that, right? And the other option would be to hire an architect, and they will create a more custom plan for you, and with the details that you want. So I kind of took advantage, the best of both worlds, I would say. Patterson Dental came through and we talked about what I wanted, how I wanted the flow to be, and they drew up a plan for me. But then I decided to hire an architect just to kind of fine tune it and put finishing touches to it, a little bit more personalized. Like I wanted a photo room in there and I wanted an in-house dental lab. So just those few things, the architect came in and they added that to it, right?
Sahar, let's be honest. How many times did you have to redraw your floor plan?
ask Sam from Patterson, and that It had to be perfect.
It did.
Um,
It did.
and
And it
so
is perfect now.
finally, and once that plan comes through, it has to be, it has to go to the city, and the city has to approve it all. And once it's approved, then you get to bid for construction. Just know that construction is not a straight line. I did not know that when I started. I thought once the plans are approved, boom, we get into construction, it's done. It is not like that at all. Unexpected things happen. No matter how much you plan, unexpected things happen, and just learn to be flexible and go with the flow. And really, that's the biggest advice that I can give, right? And as construction comes to an end, then your dental equipment goes in, and you start setting up your computers, your IT, your server. And once all that is done, then the certificate of occupancy comes into play, right? Which means the city comes through, checks everything, makes sure you're up to code, and they let you start your practice, basically start operating. After that, you can stock the cabinets and the dental supply with dental supplies, and decorate and do all that. Okay. And you know this because you and I have talked about it many times. It's definitely been an empowering journey, right? It's filled with a lot of challenges, but every obstacle it's just been a catalyst for growth, and that's what this entire process is. And for anyone that's listening or that's watching, and you're even thinking about, doing a startup, trust that you can do it. You don't have to have all the answers, but you just have to begin, right? And the rest kind of, if you have people on your side, experts on your side, good people on your side, they will help you get there for sure. Lauren, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, so quick question for you. Because I think a lot of people have this question as they're going through, if you're talking specifically about startups, we all know there's like different consultants and things like that out there. Talk to me a little bit about like the interior design and the finish out that you did. Did you have anybody that helped do the interior design of the practice? I know you mentioned it, right? You did the half Sam Patterson, right? And then half architect to help with the plans, but your office is beautiful. So can you just walk us all through that? Did you use an interior design company to help you with that plan?
I did. So I use an interior designer just so all my finishes could be cohesive, right? There was a certain kind of flow that I wanted, and I'm doing a lot of cosmetic dentistry, right? So the patients that come in, they want something very nice. So if they're going to trust me with their beautiful teeth, I wanted the space to feel cozy, right? And to feel not like a dental office. So yes, I decided to have an interior design help me with that process, but it's not necessarily something that you need, right? If you're good at design and you know what colors go together and how things come together, it's definitely not a necessity by any means. But for me, it just kind of helped me see everything before construction even took place.
Okay, perfect. Gosh, I can't think of, I mean, we've really talked about a lot of it so far. I mean, that's a good chunk of kind of what the process and the project piece looked like for you. I can't think of anything else. I mean, question wise, what do you got for me? I feel like I asked a lot of questions.
No, I think, before I started, I listened to a lot of things that TDA put out. I listened to a lot of podcasts. Just, it seemed like anywhere that I can find information that could help me even just a little bit, I tried to absorb as much of it as possible, right? And that's what I encourage associates out there to do. Just because I did it one way doesn't mean that you have to do it that way. But if you learned one little piece of pearl from this whole webinar, take that with you, right? And everyone has different perspectives on what they want to do. And some people may say, hey, startup is not for me, and I'd rather buy a practice, right? So like I said in the beginning, there's no right or wrong answer. Just do what feels right for you and what your vision is.
Yeah, so you just kind of alluded to it a little bit there, but we said it earlier too. You kind of found us right through the podcast, getting with B of A or getting into the lending space. But what were you doing before you started, aside from associating and working as a dentist? What were you doing before you made the decision to do a startup, to kind of prepare for it, if you will?
saving money, just like I said, right? Because I knew that this is what I wanted in the long run. And whether you're going to buy a house or whether you're going to get a business loan, I just knew that I needed to have some cash in the bank, right? So I didn't live like a luxurious doctor, because we all get excited once we start to make money after dental school, right? But just knowing that if you see that in your long-term plan, I mean, for me, kind of the 5 to 7 year, that was my goal out of dental
Yeah.
school. Just start saving money, just even a little bit, right? Obviously, we all have expenses and life happens, but start saving as much as you can and start educating yourself. The sooner, the better, right? And then from there, getting in touch with people that know the business more than you do, right? And understand different things. And I was lucky enough to be introduced to you, and you kind of broke everything down to me and walked me through that process. Because like I said, quite frankly, all I had was a vision. I just knew what kind of practice I wanted. I wasn't sure how to get there. And you and your team really held my hand and walked me through that process.
Thank you. Remember, this is being recorded, so I'm gonna
I
save
know,
this later and replay it.
forever.
We're gonna replay it in your office over the speakers. I'm just kidding. Awesome. And then, one other question too. Aside from the bank and Mark's story and that kind of stuff, was there anybody else that you found that was super valuable or helpful to you, kind of making decisions of how you wanted to run the practice or how you wanted to set up the practice as you were going through the process? That you used?
Mentorship is very important to me. I take a lot of continuing education. I always say find somebody that's where you want to be right now and just pick their brain. You don't have to do it exactly like they did it. Their journey is going to be different than your journey. But if they've made it to where you want to be, talk to them and just try to get as much information as you can from them. And that's going to be really the fastest way to get to where you're going, right? And just
Yeah.
and ask questions. Don't be the smartest person in any room. Ask a lot of questions.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay. I don't think I have any other questions for you, Sahar. I feel like we've covered it all. Is there anything else that you want to add?
No, I mean, I think you've answered a lot of the questions that I wish, I had answered a lot earlier than mine were answered, right? So I hope that this is valuable for anyone that's watching. I hope that it's giving people the confidence and the knowledge to carve their own path, right? I've learned that as long as you lead with passion and trust the experts around you with your vision, it will come a reality. Now that timeline may look different. It may be 6 months, it may be a year, but it'll definitely become a reality. Stay focused and don't compare yourself to others, right? Because everybody's journey is different. Me and a good friend of mine were going through this process through you at the same time, and our journeys look very much different, but we both finished. We made the finish line, right? But it just looked a little bit different.
I think your friend might have finished like 6 months ahead of you.
Again, not ourselves to anybody, because
I still love you. I just get to hang out with you a lot more than I get to hang out with them. It's okay.
comparison is truly the thief of joy. So it's your journey, make it the most fulfilling one that it can be for you.
Perfect. You've kind of hit it on the head. I think my biggest thing is what you said, just trust that you can do it. We talk about this all the time when we do our women in dentistry panels and stuff. Just trusting that you can do it, surrounding yourself with the right team, right? Having the determination and the perseverance. I think the only other thing, which is a good reminder, we talk about the duration of time that it takes, right? So it took a while for us to get from this is the spot to this is the end goal, right? This is the practice. So I think just having the patience, knowing that it could take weeks, it could take months, it could take a year, and just don't let it discourage you. You'll find the right opportunity, and that's okay, even if it takes a couple of months or whatever that might be for your journey.
It's your practice. It's somewhere where you're going to have to show up every single day,
right.
and have a team and lead a team in, right? So I'd much rather not rush that process and find a place that feels good to you, that you want to show up to every single day, and treat your patients.
I'm with you. Awesome. Well, thanks for spending, time with me tonight. I got to spend time with you last week, but I really enjoyed this. So,
Yes, thank you for having me and kind of giving me this opportunity because I know there's a lot of resources out there for dentists, but you just have to filter through, good information. And that was
right,
the hardest part for me is because you go on Google and you go, there's all these forums and everybody has an opinion and everybody just wants to pushes their opinion onto you. And I wanted this to just be a non-bias and like, let's just have a chat. This is the way I did it. You don't have to do it this way, but
right,
as long as you learned a little bit, if something I said inspired you or you were like, okay, a light bulb went off,
right.
that's, I think unbiased information is hard to find these days.
Yeah, I'm with you. I agree with you 100%. I appreciate you giving your experience and kind of talking through it. I know people always have these questions and knowing like, hey, fresh, firsthand, just came out of it is super helpful too. So
Of
thank you.
of course.
Donovan.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll pass it back over to Donovan, if he's still here with us.
There we are.
Hi.
All right. So speaking of questions, actually with timelines,
Yeah.
a question came through the chat, and it was, how long did it take you to find your ideal location, Dr. Talebloo?
So a while. For me, it took a while. I was looking for something very specific. We were looking for a standalone building. I didn't want to be in a strip mall. And then based on the locations that Mark Story came back with and the analytics that he came back with, there was just a very narrow square that we were looking into. For me, it took about 6 months to find the ideal real estate. Lauren, what's your experience? I don't even know if I want to know the answer to this, but what's your experience with?
That's a great question. So I don't want to be wrong on this number, but I think recently when I met with Practice Real Estate, they said something to the tune of there's a 97% occupancy rate in Austin, which means there's only 3% vacancies. So if that tells you anything, the numbers do, right? So again, everybody's journey is a little bit different and it depends on where you're looking, after you pull the demographics, where you want to be. We all know that the outskirts of Austin are booming and growing like crazy. So I've got some doctors that will find a space in a couple months, right? 2 months, and they're ready to go and start construction. I've got doctors that I've been working with for 3 years that still haven't found a space, and then, what we're really running into right now is the fact that we're waiting on land. We know that we hit like a big migration period during COVID and there were how many people that moved here, right? So we don't have enough buildings to put all these people in. So we've got developers that are waiting on developing and putting up buildings. So it just kind of depends on where you want to be, if there's land or building available for that lease, and being able to pull the trigger. But it does vary. I would say, typically 2 to 6 months is what I see, but some of it can be on the longer end.
Sure, sure. And do you find that most doctors are building from the ground up, or are they going into strip malls, or are they going into standalone buildings?
That's a good question. So I don't do a ton of ground up construction, because a lot of the time that again goes through SBA. We do SBA lending, as well, but that process is a little bit different. In regards to that, I would tell you that a lot of ours do lease spaces if you're a startup, and then once you've been in that space for a little bit, maybe you're bursting at the seams. You're like, hey, I want to do a second location. Then at that time, maybe we're talking about ground up or purchasing a building to do an additional location from. But most of our startup doctors are going to do a lease space as their first option. Now, they're buying, right? It's a little bit different. If you buy an office and the real estate's available for purchase, then we're talking, yeah, most of those doctors are going to buy that real estate as that investment opportunity is there. But as a startup, most are lease spaces, some are ground up. I would probably say for one out of every 10, 15. I mean, not many. Just kind of depends on where you're at too.
Very good. Excellent.
Yeah.
All right. Another question from the audience is, what was your first step when you decided that you wanted to start a practice? Like, what was the first thing you did? You said, this is it. This is for me. What do I do?
Sure. So we kind of talked about this a little bit, but for me, I always knew I wanted to own my own practice. One of the beauties about being a dentist is that you can own your own business, right? And I know a lot of us came into this wanting to be our own bosses and having our own hours and all that. So I always knew that I wanted to own my own practice, but I started very early, just picking people's brains, trying to find mentors, talking to doctors that had been in own private practice for 10 years and listening to podcasts, and like I said, there's a lot of information out there, but finding podcasts where the values align with your values or the vision aligns with your vision, that was very important to me, because then I can say, okay, I can kind of see how they got there, and maybe those are some things that I can do to get there. But education was really big for me.
Great. And then, obviously there's a ton of work. You spend a lot of time working on this project, getting the doors open. What did that feel like?
If the doors are not quite open yet, but
Okay.
they will be open soon. We got about 2 to 3 or more weeks to go.
Okay, so
It's
how does that
exciting.
feel?
It's exciting. I mean, you're right, because there was a time in the beginning where I was like, there's no way that this construction is going to end. And Lauren knows.
I thought the same thing at one
I
point.
think we
I was
all
like,
did, right?
whoa, are we ever going to have a practice, or am I just going to continue to send out dollar bills? Because
Yeah.
I'm really starting to wonder here.
It just felt like it was an unending journey, right? But now that it's coming to an end, and the furniture is going in and all these things, it really is starting to feel like what I wanted to feel, right? We talked about interior designing and them doing a rendering of what the space would look like. And it did not look like that for a long time, right? And I was like, when is it going to start to look more like that? And it's excitement. It's a little bit of nervousness, but it's a lot of excitement. And again, just knowing that all the people that have helped me through this entire process, we talk about Lauren, Mark Story, Sam from Patterson, all these people, I know that they're still behind me. So that gives me comfort. It wasn't like they came in and they did my loan and that was it. I never spoke to them again. Or they put in my equipment and I never spoke with them. They literally call and check on me weekly, if not daily, to make sure that I have everything I need. So having that comfort of these people behind me, it's like an army behind me. I feel good. I'm more excited than nervous.
Great. Well, that's great. I really appreciate y'all's time. To all of y'all in the audience, thank you so much for joining us today. We'll be sending this out via email on Thursday. So if there's anything that you have any questions about, you'll be able to review it, and it'll also live on YouTube for a portion of time. Now, I know if you have any questions for Lauren specifically, you can reach out to her at Lauren, that's LAUREN Camacho, CAMACHO at bofa.com, or you can call her at 480-487-2771. Again, that's 480-487-2771. And again, leave it to the ladies for one last goodbye, but thank you all so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Donovan. We appreciate your time too.
Yes, thank you so much for having us. And it's been a great chat, and hopefully we'll get to do it again soon.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a wonderful evening, y'all.